Once upon a time.
And Algernon says to Cicely, would you be in any way offended if I said that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection?
Welcome to Be.Content.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Don't be a plonker all your life, Rodney. I've done the deal now.
Welcome to the party, pal. That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
Here he is. Welcome.
There it is. Good. Me and the dog. How you doing?
I love that the dog's got a bow tie on. That's amazing.
Yeah, this is actually Heather's. This is Ollie, which is Heather's dog.
Hello, Ollie.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Hello.
Thanks for bringing a dog into it. I think
He's my glamorous assistant.
And not only brought a dog, you've also brought a beard along.
Yeah, this is the isolation beard. Yeah.
I'm loving it. Loving it.
Yeah.
It's a firm look, mate. How are you? You all right?
Not bad, mate. Not bad. You?
Yes, I'm very well. Despite everything, I'm going well.
Good, man.
Have you got a gin?
I've got a water and I've got a wine.
A wine. I've got a gin because you bloody love gin, so I thought I'd gin up for the occasion. Anyway, cheers.
Yeah, well, chin.
Chin. Cheers. It's nice to drink with friends in this difficult time. So the idea of this then is I want to understand more about my friends and the people that I know and care about dearly through the content they've absorbed in their lifetimes. Because I think a lot of us, we're made up of the content that we've absorbed. And I think to know a bit about how that content has shaped us teaches us a lot about who we are. Yeah. So that's the overall plan. And what I do is I tend to start at the beginning, and then we work up to the content that you absorb on a daily basis today.
All right. Okay. Interesting.
Thank you. Well, it's turned into a bit of a therapy sesh so far. With a lot of
Am I going to start crying?
Probably not, mate. Probably not.
All right. Okay.
It'll be a nice little anthology, a collection for the generations to come to see what Chris Hillebrandt enjoyed listening to, watching, reading, and absorbing.
There we go. Marvellous.
Excellent. So I want to start right at the very beginning. What is the first piece of content you remember absorbing? TV show, song, book, whatever it is.
Oh, crikey. First bit of content.
Thomas the Tank Engine has featured strong in this category.
See, I'm a bit older than the ones you've interviewed so far. So Thomas bit sort of, I was a bit older then. So first bit of, oh, crikey. I mean, I guess it would have been probably, I'm guessing, maybe, I'm thinking like, the TV shows that, you sort of watch as a kid. And probably something like Mr. Ben is one that sort of springs to mind.
Mr. Ben.
Yeah.
Bagpuss. Andy Pandy I've had.
Yeah, see, Andy Pandy, Andy Pandy, I think, was actually kind of before my time. I think Andy Pandy's, although, maybe a little bit, but Andy Pandy's quite old. But yeah, the ones I remember, things like Bagpuss and Mr. Ben, Bod was one as well, the Clangers. So probably, I suppose the TV things are kind of what's coming into my head. So, yeah.
So Bagpuss I know, and I think they've done a remake of Bagpuss, which is like sacrilege. Sacrilege.
You down, doggy, come on.
And I know Mr. Ben. Pod. I've not heard of Pod. What's Pod?
No, Bod.
Bod, right? Bod.
Yeah, which was kind of this sort of cartoon thing for kids. What else? I think. Yeah, that's probably the ones I would say. Yeah.
So this was TV after school, or?
Yeah, it would have been TV. Yeah, after school, Sunday and Saturday mornings, that stuff. So probably mainly after school and Saturday and weekend mornings. Yeah.
What about a bit later then? I've had a stark memory. I've always had this memory of being in the car with my dad and knowing the tracks in the car on the CDs that he was playing, and not just knowing the tracks, knowing what track is coming next, based on knowing the way that they roll on. Have you got any car sort of memories, or what your parents listened to, or what your?
I think we kind of tended to listen to the radio more normally. So you'd hear a lot of songs. I was always really into sort of music when I was younger, but it was typically, I think it was in the car. It was more radio. So there weren't necessarily, there aren't like albums that I can think of, or tracks that kind of like go one after the other.
So was it Radio 4?
No, it would have been probably in those days. We used to listen to, it would have been stuff like Capital Radio. That was the one that seemed to get played quite a lot. And I guess, I don't know, were they played Radio 2? I can't remember. Maybe Radio 1 even. Actually, probably Radio 1, because they obviously would have been younger. Anyway, DJs like Kenny Everitt. One of the first I remember was Kenny Everitt was a really popular DJ when I was young. Again, a bit before your time, and he was the kind of the zany, wacky kind of DJ of the time. And so I've got a lot of memories of hearing Kenny Everitt. He was kind of a big star back in the sort of 70s and 80s.
Awesome. So I'm gonna have to find a clip or something of Kenny Everitt.
Yeah.
That'll be good. Kenny Everitt. So what about literature then? Do you remember, for instance, a lot of people remember their GCSE English text that they had to study in those years. Do you remember any literature that springs to mind from that era?
What sort of age are you talking about? Really young, or?
Oh, well, I'm flexible. Childhood. Let's just cover childhood in literary terms.
Okay. I mean, I think when I was really young, I mean, I can't remember in particular. I mean, I remember at school studying stuff like Romeo and Juliet. We did the sort of, that was the Shakespeare that we did. And so what was the one we did? Romeo and Juliet. We did Lord of the Flies. That was
Lord of the Flies,
which was great. I love that one. We know Piggy and Who's Got the Conch and all that. And that was, it was quite harrowing, actually. It was quite a creepy kind of book. But I remember doing that, and that kind of really stuck with me. But that's probably, I suppose, you're talking, I don't know, age-wise, crikey. I suppose it would have been
15.
Yeah, maybe younger, sort of like between 10 and 15. Probably, I think I seem to recall sort of 10, 11-ish, I think we did Lord of the Flies. And I remember, but it was kind of, it's quite dark. I don't know whether you know it, but it's quite famous.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
And it is kind of quite brutal too, so it's one of those things that kind of stuck with me. So
it's interesting. Everyone remembers their GCSE sort of text that they studied. I'm sure. I'm just looking back yesterday to see what else we had. I think I've had Lord of the Flies as well. Anyway, I'm going to do a list. I'm going to do a whole list of all the people's GCSE stuff from years and years. Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about teenagerhood. Let's talk about adolescence. Did you go through a switch? Were you a moody teenager?
Was I? I don't think I was really. No, I think I was all right actually. I was fairly sort of quiet. But I wasn't. I think my mum always says that I had there was one summer when I was a right miserable bugger. I think I was probably around, I think it was like 14, 15. And she always says that there was that one summer where I was horrible. But apart from that, I actually wasn't too bad. I was all right. I wasn't too much of a troublemaker. I was fairly sort of like, fairly reasonably sort of quiet and reserved when I was sort of that sort of age. So,
and do you have siblings?
Hey?
Do you have siblings?
One sister, sister 3 years younger. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
She was a horror as a teenager.
She was a horror.
I was a good.
Reliably, but we'll have to tag her in it just so she knows that you've outed her as a horrible child. Cool. So it's the four of you, and you're based locally in Wokingham, or are you somewhere else?
Yeah. So I mean, depending what sort of age you're talking. So between the age of about roughly 6 and 11 or 12, I was literally round the corner from where I am right now, because I lived round the corner from where I'm living right now. So so if it was like a 10-year-old me, I would have been literally sort of a couple of 100 yards down the road.
Over there.
So yeah, and then we moved away when I was 12 and then came back. So so grew up in this kind of area.
So where did you go at 12?
We moved to Kings Langley. So we were living in Wokingham, moved to Kings Langley in Hertfordshire.
Right.
There for about 4 years. So I was basically there for secondary school, did my and then when I was 16, this would have been 86, we moved back to this kind of area, to Lower Early. I've kind of been in this kind of area, since then. So for a long time,
So you were was the scene very different? I mean, you're very young to be involved in a scene, I suppose, at that age. But
Yeah.
did anything change musically for you, or sort of TV shows that you watched? Did it change at all when you moved?
When I moved, not really, no. Although I suppose, I mean, musically, I suppose for me, I kind of started taking music. I mean, everyone's different. I started taking music seriously, I reckon, when I was about kind of 10 or 11. So I remember
young.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was younger, I used to sort of, my dad, bless him, when I was very young, gave me his old record player, which was one of these tiny little record player things, like a stacker thing. So basically, you'd put these records on and you could hold like 7 or 8 at a go and they'd like drop down one at a time and play. So I borrowed my parents' records basically, and so from a fairly young age, the kind of records that I would borrow that they were listening to would have been stuff like the Beatles and 10cc and the Who and that kind of stuff. So I really liked that kind of stuff. But then when I was about 10 or 11, I guess I kind of then discovered music, I guess, in a way, and discovered a band called Adam and the Ants. You may have heard of.
I've heard of them.
A bit of a fan. So that was the kind of that. It was early 80s, so it would have been when I first started getting into music. It was kind of, you had this kind of post-punk kind of new wave kind of thing going on. It was a really interesting time. A lot of kind of really weird, a lot of one-hit wonders. But yeah, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, in terms of being part of a scene, you know, I don't think it necessarily changed when I moved.
Right.
Else, I was still into the same kind of stuff.
So once you found that genre and that style, you were hooked. That was it. And you've literally not looked back since.
Yeah, obviously over the years, you know, your tastes change and evolve. I'm now that sort of age now where I'm kind of like going back to my childhood and sort of revisiting. So I find that the last few years I'm doing the classic nostalgia thing of listening to stuff that I listened to 30 years ago. Yeah. But yeah, I guess, you know, I mean, musical tastes kind of change and they have evolved over time. But I guess probably if I listen to the kind of stuff, the stuff I listen to these days is probably similar to the kind of stuff I was listening to, you know, when I was 11 or 12. That's
cool. No, that's great. So, because I know that you're wedded to Adam and the Ants, and like I've said a couple of times now, everyone's got that artist or that book or that franchise that belongs to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my friend, Harry Potter is for me one of those ones that I'm really close to. But I've got a friend who owns Harry Potter. He knows everything. Adam Dobson knows everything there is to know. Like they joke with him. They all get round a table, and one of them has got this. One of the group of friends has got this Harry Potter quiz game. And they'll literally go round the room and just fire questions at him, and he knows everything about.
He'd acknowledge, yeah.
So I feel like I own Harry Potter until I'm in a room with him, and then I sort of yield my ownership of that franchise to him. But yours is Adam and the Ants, and that is like indomitable. It's your franchise.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. It's partly taking the piss. It's kind of slightly ironic, but I did genuinely. You know, they were the first band that I got massively into. Yeah. Bore you. I probably have over the years bored you with kind of like, you know, the reasons why and the sort of why the history of, you know, of Adam and the Ants and why they were such a big thing at the time. And it's kind of, you know, I sort of joke about it now, but it's like there's still some really good stuff there, and I still think they're still like, you know, but real important kind of.
Yeah. So if you had to crystallize the reason.
Yeah.
You know, if you had to crystallize what resonated with them to you?
Oh, I think at the time it was kind of one of those things where I think they were just very different to a certain degree. When they came out, they were kind of the in band. So you kind of, you know, obviously before your time, but they were one of those bands where for a year or two they were massive. They really were, and everyone liked them. Well, most people liked them. But it was, I think, what I liked about them is that they were kind of. I liked the music. They had this kind of slightly weird sort of tribal glam rock sort of thing going on. But visually, they were amazing. You know, obviously, you got all the dressing up and the costumes. And I suppose thinking about it now, I look back now, and although at the time I wasn't particularly interested in things like theatre and stuff, now in my later years I've got involved in theatre. You look at Adam and the Ants and the image, and they were famous for doing these like very lavish videos, which were like little mini kind of mini films in a way, which was at the time really unusual. So they were visually spectacular. You had all the mad costumes going on. It just felt like really different and exciting. So they kind of just captured the imagination, really.
Amazing. I mean, that's lovely, and I like because I know that you dressed up, didn't you, for your Sorry to miss.
I was going to wear the jacket tonight, actually. Yeah.
Good stuff. So you said about the bit. So do you still have all those records? Because we're talking retro. The record player is back with a vengeance.
With a vengeance, yeah. I'm a classic. I think it's possibly a bloke thing. I'm definitely a hoarder and a collector. Yeah. You know, and it tends to be, at the risk of being a bit sexist, it's a bit of a bloke thing generally. But I've always been one of these people. I collect stuff. So over the years, be it whether it's books or records or whatever. So I've still got all the old records that I've had for donkey's years.
So I'll give you a bit of homework. Let's after this, once I've posted this video and it's all up, what I would love you to do is give us a little tour on your phone or whatever, a camera, and give us a little tour of your record collection and
I could do that.
Show us a few of your choice albums. And post that in the comment section. That'd be good. So as contributory appendix content to this video. That'd be great. Films? Any films that are coming up about now?
Do you know what that's because that sort of era. It's the films, and I was massively into films at that. So I suppose probably at that kind of age, actually. In fact, I suppose in terms of like culturally, my passion probably then was films over music. And that sort of era, 86, so you had films roughly that sort of era, 85, 86, when I think you would have films such as Top Gun, Platoon, there was, I'm trying to think of a few others, that sort of era. Crocodile Dundee, that was kind of that sort of era.
The legendary Crocodile Dundee.
Legendary Crocodile Dundee, with Paul Hogan. So, there was some of the big ones that I remember from that kind of era.
It was, when you look back, it was sort of a golden age, wasn't it? That sort of late 80s.
Yeah, I guess so. Was Back to the Future, was that kind of that?
That was that era. Yeah.
Spielberg was, of course, the man.
Yeah.
Days, so a lot of Spielberg films. It was kind of golden age. Was it a golden age? I guess to a degree. Yeah. There was.
There was a lot of shit.
There was a lot of shit. Yeah, I mean, one of the films I remember actually, Top Gun was was a massive film that came out. I hated it. Everyone loved Top Gun.
Did you?
Yeah, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. Yeah, and I was in a way, I was exactly the right kind of target. I was a 16-year-old boy.
If they could have painted the target audience demographic, they would have painted Chris Hillebrandt.
Absolutely. I remember everyone going to see it, and it's amazing. And I remember thinking, what a load of I thought it was. I really did. I thought it was just commercial, like just a big advert for the American Air Force. I thought it was awful. I haven't watched. I mean, if I watched it now, that was probably me being a little bit pretentious as a teenager. And I'd probably perfectly enjoy it if I watched it now. I'd probably love it now, to be fair. But I remember thinking,
this is another secret reason for doing this podcast, right? Mm-hmm. I've not actually seen Top Gun.
Have you not? Okay, wow.
And people are like,
okay,
I'm thoroughly underwell read and underwell filmed. So yeah, I've not seen. So I'd love to see it, and it's one of those ones that's on my list of films that I must watch this year, and it has been for about 4 years.
Okay,
so let's watch it.
Yeah, I think you probably should you probably should see it. I mean, it's it would probably look. Is it dated? It's probably dated. I don't know. Again, I haven't seen it for years. It's Tom Cruise in full-on kind of Tom Cruise mode.
Tom Cruise mode, yeah.
Yeah. But,
that's one that you hated particularly. What's a film that stands out from that sort of late 80s era? What was the best? What was the favourite?
Oh, crikey. Actually, one of the ones that really sticks out was actually a film called Platoon, which was a similar kind of era, and it was an Oliver Stone film. It was the Vietnam. There's a whole slew of kind of Vietnam films in the 80s, like Platoon and Full Metal Jacket. And I remember seeing Platoon at the cinema. It's got Charlie Sheen in. Very young Charlie Sheen, and it was just one of those films I hadn't seen anything like it. Again, I haven't watched it since it came out, so I must watch it again. But it was a real brutal kind of Vietnam War film before there was a load of those sort of films coming, and I remember just sitting in the cinema and I was literally just like gripping the side of the chair. It was so tense and it was really, really, really full on. So I remember that kind of really stuck with me. Yeah.
Awesome. Love it. And again, that's another one I've not seen.
Yeah, again, it might have dated now. I don't know. There's been so many. I mean, I think also, these days there's a lot of war films and so whether it's still as powerful, probably not. But yeah,
that was one of the first big ones, particularly about that war.
It was certainly, it was in that kind of era, that period. It was a real big film, and it was it was impressive. Yeah.
So college business studies, that was a 2-year course, 4-year course, 3-year course. What are we talking about?
2 years. Yeah.
2 years.
2 years. Yeah.
So 2 years in, you come out with this bright and shiny qualification, and what did you do?
I did what any 18-year-old bloke would want to do, and I went to work for an insurance company. I went
a rock and roll life.
Oh yeah, I basically, do you know what? I was 8. I didn't have a clue what to do, like a lot of people. I was 18 years old. I'd done a couple of years college. I remember thinking I was tempted to go to university, probably more for the kind of lifestyle than anything else. But in the end, I think what I remember was I wanted to work. I wanted to earn money, and I'd doing my business studies course. I'd spent like a week or a couple of weeks work experience at a company called Sun Alliance. So hadn't been there, over that summer or whatever it was. I went there and basically I was a home insurance underwriter. Woo!
Nice.
That was my first.
But it fit the brief, right? It got you money.
Yeah, exactly.
Cash in the bank, happy days.
Yeah.
So how long were you at Sun Life?
I was there 3 years. 3 years. Yeah. That's where I met Mark Hamshere. We both worked there. So you're talking, 30 odd years ago. So long time ago. Yeah.
Okay. So was he doing the theatre at this point?
No, he got. I think Mark got into theatre probably not long after that. Actually, I think he was probably early 20s. To check with him, but I think he was like early mid-20s when he started getting into it. I didn't. I had no interest. I mean, that sort of age. I mean, culture. I wasn't really particularly into theatre. I remember, again, it's certainly in my 20s. Big into films and music. But theatre, I would go to the occasional show, but it wasn't a passion.
So we're gearing up sort of throughout your 20s then, and we're in the dirge of the 90s now, right? So culture, the golden age as I described it is now dead. We're in the 90s. Nothing is happening. We've got S Club 7. So what was going on culturally? What sort of film? Did anything stick out in the 90s at all in terms of films?
Oh, crikey, what was in the 90s? What films? What sticks out? I guess it was... there was stuff like Robocop, and that was one of the big ones in the 90s. And what else was there? Do you know, I top of my head, I can't even... I've gone blank.
The 90s, a lot of people I've spoken to just say the 90s was just nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's films like Wall Street. Fatal Attraction, was that one of the 90s ones? It wasn't the golden era at all. No, absolutely. No. I think also in the 90s, you had, I guess that was the kind of age where video would come in.
Yeah.
So you'd have a lot of films which would kind of go straight to video. So I think the quality kind of seemed to go down, dipped a little bit. So a lot of films were made specifically for the kind of the home rental on Glory VHS. So, but yes, it's bad. Now, there's not really many films which kind of stick out off the top of my head from that kind of. What
about TV? Have we got anything good on TV going on?
What's going on TV in the 90s? 90s. Oh, crikey! What was I watching in the 90s? Do you know what? I suppose probably something like actually Blackadder. Was Blackadder 90s?
Blackadder.
That was I was thinking earlier actually. I knew you were going to ask about kind of films and TV and stuff and what kind of sticks in my head.
Yeah.
And certainly something like Blackadder was kind of one of those shows which was it was a big cultural thing and one of those things as well that everybody would watch together. I guess thinking about that must be late 80s, early 90s. I reckon.
This sort of era, and funnily enough, it ties quite nicely in because Blackadder is, of course, the piece of content that unites you and me.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking. I mean, that is that is our that's where obviously we met. 3 years ago, 2020. So I would hazard a guess 2017 or 18.
17, 18. I thought it was 15, but it couldn't have been 15.
Oh no! It was October.
It was.
I reckon it was about 2 to 3 years ago. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, mate, it's all blurs into
doesn't it just all blurs into one. So TV, we've got some sort of tidbits of Blackadder, Fatal Attraction, Robocop, but the 90s was pretty dry, wasn't it? I think that's a consensus that we're coming to around.
It was, yeah, and actually, I mean, I'll be honest. So in terms of, in fact, the 90s, particularly the early 90s. So again, it was the kind of era of sort of VHS, and in my kind of, would it have been the more 80s? Certainly in my kind of late teens, I went through a phase of like, I was massively into horror films and what sort of geeky stuff. And so me and my friend would get the video shop every other evening and sort of rent out any old sort of nonsense, because it was that kind of era, you know.
Yeah.
Of the sort of cheesy kind of cheesy horror films. We went through a phase of watching all kind of ridiculous films like Reanimator and Evil Dead, all those kind of things.
Reanimator,
yeah,
Evil Dead,
yeah. It's that kind of it's the sort of that era of the sort of 80s where they were just chucking out all kinds of nonsense.
Are those the standout ones? What, are there any?
Yeah, there was all kind of nonsense that was out, but they're the sort of the ones that probably were slightly less shit and slightly more watchable.
What was the worst? What was the most?
Oh God, there were some terrible ones. There was some absolutely awful films.
If someone's looking for a really horror film, where would you point them?
Where do you start? There were so many in that kind of in the 80s and early 90s. I was one called Puppetmaster, which is it's like little dolls that come to life and kill people. It was kind of terrible, but in a good way. We used to get a kick out of watching, things that
best kind of awful.
It's kind of B movies, I had a bit of a thing for sort of cheesy B movies.
Awesome. Okay, so the turn of the millennium. New content was coming out. We're starting to get a bit more improvement in the quality of content that's being produced.
Okay, yeah.
Like the Matrix, for instance, for me that was sort of 99, 2000.
Was it?
Bug Fears, all of that.
Yeah. I think. Well, I guess that sort of era, technology suddenly, something like the Matrix was an interesting one because it's a bloody good film. But some of the kind of effects they were using were pretty spectacular. So that was a bit of a game changer, wasn't it? So I guess things did sort of. And I think it. I mean, again, off the top of my head, I remember that sort of era. I would go to the cinema quite a lot, quite regularly. So I was seeing a lot of stuff and films. Yeah, I guess did sort of tend to pick up that kind of era. Definitely, yeah.
But not music. What are you still listening to?
Music,
80s stuff, or have you?
No, okay. So I guess kind of music-wise, early 80s, I was massively into my music and all the sort of Adam and the Ant stuff and all the other sort of new wave things. Then I kind of lost a bit of interest in music in the sort of mid 80s. It got a little bit bland, a little bit middle of the road. And then it was mid 90s. I kind of got back into music. So I was a big fan of you had the whole sort of BritPop explosion, which is all the kind of your sort of Blur and Oasis and Radiohead, those sort of things. And I was massively into that. And I must say, culturally, I guess that sort of era, kind of late 90s onwards and certainly into the 2000s, I was going to a lot of concerts. So I became sort of quite a regular concert goer. So I guess in terms of a cultural point, before that, I didn't go to many gigs at all. But then that was kind of, mid 90s onwards, I became quite a regular kind of gig and festival goer. But it was more the kind of, and it was a different kind of music. It was more the sort of Britpop stuff was more kind of guitar based, and in terms of the style, it was more the style of it was more of a throwback to the 60s, really. So bands like Blur and Oasis and Supergrass and Shed 7. It was kind of they were kind of a similar kind of style musically to the likes of the Beatles and the Who and the Stones and the Kinks. So it was a different kind of thing. But I loved all of that. And I think the reason I liked that probably was because, going back to what I was saying earlier, when I was really, really young and I got my first record player from Dad, I was listening to stuff like the Beatles and the Kinks and 10cc and ELO and the Who. So I loved all that kind of stuff as a kid. So when everything, you get to a certain age, I'm a bit of an old git now, and you see most things go full circle, you know, in terms of fashions and styles, and the same with music. The sort of musical styles tend to go full circle. So at that period, you were having that lot. It was kind of really throwing back to that kind of 60s sound, which I loved. Yeah,
awesome. So I hadn't thought of it in those terms. So the late 90s, all that BritPop stuff's coming back. And you're getting so best standout concert. Who was best live?
Who was the best live? The best. I don't know. The one I remember most of all, just because it was a huge thing, was I remember seeing Oasis at Nebworth, which was in 96, and that was a real massive that was a big kind of cultural event, and that was a full day festival. It was something like 250,000 people there or something stupid, and that was quite memorable. Best band, do you know what? I'll be honest, it was one of those things where half the time I go to these gigs and you have a few beers and you don't always remember them that well. So I haven't got the best memory of them. But, I know I had a bloody good time. So
excellent, cool. So that's great. So what about then? We're moving into the sort of the naughty, that sort of 2000s. The Britpop thing has sort of died down at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So now we've got a whole new generation of artists coming through on every scene. We've got new filmmakers. We've got new. Everything's coming up, and the whole new is the big deal. So what's sort of coming back from that era?
So we're talking what? So the sort of the 2000s onwards. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we're getting into the new stuff now, aren't we? We're getting into the what?
Well, okay. So I'll be honest. So musically, I probably that's probably the sort of stage where I start kind of like disconnecting a bit from what's in the charts. You know, I think the last time I can remember being really sort of aware of like who's in the charts and whatever, it's probably the 90s. And I guess that's for most people. You get to a certain age, and so I would have been probably like in my sort of 20s and early 30s. But you get to the sort of, I suppose, you're certainly your 30s, and you start, most of the sort of stuff that's in the charts is for the kids, basically. So I've kind of lost touch with sort of what's going on musically by then. Film-wise, what was going on? I guess probably that must be, I suppose, the kind of era where you got the likes of Tarantino's coming in, you know, with he's probably one of the big filmmakers, that sort of era. So yeah, that's probably he's probably the filmmaker that kind of stands out, I would say, from that kind of era. He's the big one.
Mm-hmm. So we're moving into sort of recent times then. So what sort of content are you absorbing on the regular at the moment?
At the moment, all kinds. But of course, the thing is now we are living in the world where, you know, you've got streaming services for music and for films. So content now is interesting. Things have kind of got bonkers now. And we're almost kind of overwhelmed with stuff. So you've got access now. So like a lot of people, I've got Spotify, I've got Netflix, plus you've got TV stuff. So you've got access to sort of everything. So I'm finding now that I tend to now, so musically and with films and TV, I'll watch a lot of modern stuff, but I'll watch a lot of older stuff too. So music, for example, I mentioned earlier on, I'm kind of like doing that thing where I'm doing the nostalgia thing of revisiting bands and singers that I listened to back in the sort of 80s. So I will quite often listen to a lot of the stuff now that I was listening to 20, 30 years ago. Revisiting it. And the same thing with films now. You know, I still keep up to date with films and watch a lot of stuff. I don't go to the cinema so much these days, like a lot of people. It's,
well, you don't need to now, do you? Because you've got it all click the button.
Yeah, but again, I'm kind of at the point now where I'm kind of, as well as watching newer films, I'm revisiting a lot of stuff that I watched sort of 20, 30 years ago. And it's quite nice actually to go back to watch films that you watched that long ago,
revisiting them,
and revisit them, you know, with a sort of more grown-up eyes, you know. And there's some films that have really dated badly. You think, Christ, that's awful. Other films, you think, wow, that was really good, you know.
So, what about films that you've revisited and you've gone, wow, I'm getting something totally different than when I watched it the first time?
Yeah. I mean, there's there was a film I saw recently that I'm trying to think that I watched where I didn't like it originally, and this time I absolutely loved it.
With new eyes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was I think it was a film called Blowout. which is it's an old Brian De Palma film. So Brian De Palma is a director. De Palma was sort of big in the sort of 70s and 80s. He did a lot of stuff. He was the kind of era of Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, people like that. There's a film called Blowout, which is an old film with John Travolta from the early 80s, a very young John Travolta. Yeah. It's John Travolta plays a filmmaker who witnesses. It's like a political drama. He witnesses a murder, and it's a politician gets murdered, and he has to kind of solve the mystery.
Thank you for that. So are you a box set man? Are you a box set enthusiast?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I suppose we all like a binge, don't we?
We do.
So yeah, like a lot of people, I've been kind of binging through various TV shows recently.
Any that stand out?
There's one called My Dad Wrote a Porno. That's good. That's funny. I listen to Mark Hermode, who's the film reviewer. Does a lot of does a couple of podcasts. They're good. I must admit, I was an avid listener to Brexitcast.
Me too.
Yeah, it was genuinely interesting, actually.
Oh, we've not done theatre. I
go into theatre purely and simply. So I was getting nagged about, she should come along and audition, and I remember thinking, maybe I should just give it a go. And long story short, there was a play that Lloyd White was directing called The Front Page, and I think someone had dropped out. They said, come along and read for it, and it'll be a laugh. It's only a small part. So I went along, got the part, and it was only a small little part. I remember thinking, okay, I'm doing this just to really, it's like kind of a test for myself to see if I can do it. I'm thinking, if I can at least just, be able to learn some lines and at least stand on stage and not look like a complete and just completely die like a rabbit in the headlights and just get through it, I'll be really proud of myself, So we did the play and I got through it. I didn't pass out on stage or throw up. So that was good. And then it's one of those things where I just gradually over the next few years kind of got more and more involved. As you do, you meet more people. If nothing else, you get an after-show curry out of it. So
absolutely.
For that. And then and over the years, I've just gradually got more and more involved. And kind of then sort of got into directing a bit as well. And I love it now. So obviously it's now a big part of my life. And I've been sort of, I suppose, a regular for a few years now.
And of course, you did my show for me. You did Dance with me, which was great. Any other standout shows that from your theatrical part?
So I mean, the standout show probably is one. The one I always think of is a play that I directed called Bug a few years ago, which was my directorial debut. So the first play I directed, and that was always kind of a bit special because it was, for me, I'd always kind of back in the day. I mentioned some earlier on about going to sort of business studies college and then working for insurance. I kind of always wanted. Well, when I was younger, I went through a phase of I wanted to be a filmmaker or a director. That was my kind of thing. And basically, I just never did it. I never really had the kind of the courage to sort of to follow my dreams and go for it. So I'd always had this thing about directing. And with Bug, it was a play that I'd read. I'd seen the film originally actually, and then read the script and loved it. And it's one of those things where I thought, okay, I really want to direct, and I have to direct this. So I think it went pretty well, and it was just a real great experience doing it, and it felt so good to put on a show where you're responsible ultimately, and so that was the one. That's the one that kind of stands out for me, definitely.
It's weird. I was just writing before we started that it's been really nice over the since I've been doing this, just getting to know people, getting to know people in a different way that you don't. Otherwise. So thank you very much for your time. And if I could trouble you for a quote from a film or a book or a piece of music, or just any sort of quote that you want to give to the world from your content library.
A quote. What can I say? Do you know what? Okay. Off the top of my head, put me on the spot there. I'm going to give you a musical quote from Mr. Adamant. Ridicule is nothing to be scared of.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Wise words.
Wise words. Thank you very much, Chris.
You're welcome.
And I will look forward to seeing you soon when all this Corona madness is over.
Absolutely. You're welcome, my friend.